The snow had been falling over Vancouver for 2 days without stopping, the kind of cold that got into your bones and stayed there, the kind that made the city feel like it had been erased and replaced with a quieter, crueler version of itself. Simone Aubert stood in the doorway of the parkade on Granville Street. Her daughter pressed against her side, both of them watching the street like it might offer something. It never did. Lily was 7 years old and had stopped asking why they were sleeping in different places every few nights. Children learn that quickly, Simone had discovered. They learn which questions make their mothers' faces go tight, and they stop asking those ones. The backpack on Simone's shoulders held everything they had left. A change of clothes for Lily, a water bottle, the folder with their documents, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag because the zipper had broken 3 months ago, and she had not found another bag that worked as well. She kept the folder close to her body, always, because the documents were the only proof that they existed the way they used to exist. Before, she had been an accountant. That was the part that still surprised her sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep when her mind wandered back to what her life had looked like. 8 years at a firm in Burnaby. Clean numbers, clear logic, the satisfaction of balance. A mortgage she was slowly paying off. A daughter in a school with good teachers and a yard with swings. And then her husband's debts had come looking for her. She had not known about the debts until after he left. That was the thing people never believed when she told them. He had been careful, thorough, the way some people are careful and thorough about the wrong things. His name was on everything, their shared account. The line of credit, she thought, was for home improvements. The second mortgage she had never signed but somehow existed, with a signature that looked enough like hers that no bank wanted to investigate too closely. By the time she understood what had happened, the account was empty, the line of credit was maxed, and the mortgage payments had not been made in 4 months. The firm let her go because a bookkeeper caught in a financial collapse, even one that was not her fault, was a liability. That was the word they used. Liability. She had taken Lily and left the house the night the locks were changed by the bank, which was the same night she discovered that every number she had carefully maintained for 8 years meant nothing because the foundation had never been solid. That was 11 months ago. Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, I'm cold." Simone looked down at her daughter's face, at the red cheeks and the serious brown eyes, and she felt the familiar tightening in her chest that she had learned to breathe through. "I know, sweetheart, we're going to find somewhere warm." The soup kitchen on Davy Street closed at 8. The shelter on Burrard had a waiting list that stretched past the new year. Simone had learned the geography of need the way she had once learned the geography of spreadsheets, systematically, completely, because survival required it. She did not know, as she stood in that doorway watching the snow collect on the pavement, that the silver car idling at the corner had been there for 6 minutes. She did not notice it until the window came down and a woman leaned out. Not a man. She had been taught to fear the men who idled in expensive cars near women who were alone. "Excuse me," the woman called. She had a low, clear voice, the kind that carried without effort. "Are you all right?" Simone pulled Lily closer. "We're fine. You've been standing there since I came out of the building." A pause. "It's -12. Simone did not answer. She was calculating, which was what she did now instead of budgeting and balancings. Calculating risk. Calculating distance to the next option. The car door opened. The woman who stepped out was perhaps 50, with short dark hair and a coat that probably cost more than a month of Simone's old salary. She walked toward them without hurrying, stopping at a respectful distance, and Simone could see that she held nothing in her hands. "My name is Catherine Rowe," the woman said. "I own the restaurant in this building, and I want you to know that I'm not going to pretend I didn't see you, because I've been the person that people pretended not to see, and it is a terrible thing." Lily looked up at the woman with the frank curiosity of a 7-year-old who had not yet learned to hide her interest. "You own a restaurant?" Catherine Rowe looked at Lily and something in her expression shifted. "I do, and it's very warm inside. We have bread that came out of the oven 20 minutes ago." Simone said nothing. She was very good at saying nothing when her instincts were at war with each other. Catherine did not push. She simply held the door open and waited, her hand on the frame, not looking at them, giving them the dignity of a decision made without being watched. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was Lily's hand tightening in hers. Maybe it was the smell of bread that reached them even from the doorway. Simone walked inside. The restaurant was closed for the night, the dining room dim and quiet, with white tablecloths and candles that had been blown out hours ago. Catherine Rowe led them past it all to the kitchen at the back, which was still warm from a full evening of service, the air thick with garlic and something sweet. A young cook looked up from where he was cleaning the stovetop. Catherine spoke to him in a low voice. He nodded and disappeared. "Sit," Catherine said, gesturing to the long stainless counter where the staff presumably ate. It was clean and plain, and felt more honest than the dining room with its tablecloths. Simone sat. Lily climbed up beside her and immediately the hanging pots above the prep station. "Those are all different sizes," Lily observed. "They are," Catherine said. "The big one is for soup. The small one is for sauces. Do you like soup?" "I like tomato." "Then you're in luck." The cook returned with bowls, with bread, with butter, and a glass of milk for Lily that she accepted with the polite seriousness of a child who had learned to be grateful without being pitiful. Simone watched her daughter eat and felt something in her chest that she could not name, something between grief and a fierce, burning love. Catherine poured 2 cups of tea and sat across from them at the counter. "You do not have to tell me anything," she said. "You don't owe me your story, but I'd like to listen, if you want to tell it." Simone looked at this woman across a kitchen counter in a closed restaurant at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, and she thought about all the things she had not been able to say to anyone for 11 months, about the shame that had no logic to it but lived in her chest anyway, about the way the world had a particular face for people like her now, a face that looked away. She told Catherine everything. It took a long time. Lily finished her soup and her bread and her milk, and her head drooped onto Simone's arm, and she slept the deep, uncomplicated sleep of children who trust their mothers to handle everything. Catherine listened without interrupting, without the uncomfortable shifting that people did when a story made them want to offer solutions before the telling was finished. She just listened, and her face was steady. When Simone finished, the kitchen was very quiet. "Your husband," Catherine said. "Where is he now?" "I don't know, he left the province. I have a number, but he doesn't answer. And the financial fraud. Did you file a report?" Simone almost laughed. "I tried. The bank said there wasn't enough evidence of forgery. The police said it was a civil matter. My lawyer, my former lawyer, before I couldn't pay him anymore, said I had a case, but it would take years and money I don't have." Catherine nodded slowly. "I know something about cases that take years and money." She stood and walked to the window at the back of the kitchen, the one that looked out onto a service lane where the snow was still falling, piling softly against the bins. "I'd like to make you an offer," she said, without turning around. "You're free to say no. You're free to finish your tea and take your daughter and leave and never think about this conversation again. But I'd like you to hear me first." Simone waited. Catherine turned. "I have a room above this restaurant. It belongs to the building, which belongs to me. A former employee used it for storage for years, and I had it cleared out 6 months ago and furnished, thinking I might rent it. I haven't found the right tenant." She paused. "I think that's because the right tenant was supposed to arrive in a snowstorm." Simone stared at her. "I can't pay. I'm not asking you to pay, not yet." Catherine held up a hand. "I have a proposition. A real one, with real terms, not charity. I need a bookkeeper. My accountant retired in October, and I have been doing my own books for 3 months, and it has been, honestly, a disaster. I'm a very good restaurateur and a very bad accountant, and I need someone who understands numbers. I'm not licensed anymore. I let my certification lapse. I'm not asking for a license. I'm asking for someone who understands what they're looking at." Catherine looked at her steadily. "You were an accountant for 8 years. That doesn't leave you." Simone was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her daughter sleeping against her arm, at the small face that was so trusting even in sleep. "What are you asking for in return?" she said. Catherine almost smiled. "Exactly what I said. Books that balance. And perhaps someone at the table who looks at a number and sees what it means." Simone thought of the folder in her backpack, the documents proving who she used to be. She thought of the balance sheets she had once kept so clean, the satisfaction of a column that came out right, the specific intelligence of understanding where every dollar was and why. "I want proper terms," Simone said. "Written. I want to know what you're paying, what you're expecting, what happens if either of us decides this isn't working. I don't want charity and I don't want ambiguity." Catherine's almost smile became a real one. "I'd expect nothing less from an accountant." That night, for the first time in 11 months, Simone put Lily to bed in a room with a real door that locked. The room was small, with a window that looked out over Granville Street and the snow still coming down. But it had a bed with clean sheets and a lamp on the nightstand and a radiator that ticked warmly in the corner. Lily curled into the bed and was asleep before Simone had finished tucking the blankets. Simone sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the city. She did not trust this. She was not built for trust anymore, not the easy kind. But she was built for precision, for reading a situation until she understood its actual shape, and what she had seen in Catherine Rowe's face across that kitchen counter was not performance. It was something more complicated than kindness. It was recognition. She started work the next morning. The restaurant's books were, as Catherine had promised, a disaster. 3 months of receipts stuffed into folders with no consistent system, vendor payments recorded in 2 different places, a payroll spreadsheet that had been annotated in 4 different colors by what appeared to be 4 different people. Simone sat at the desk in the small office off the kitchen and looked at all of it and felt something she had not felt in almost a year. She felt capable. It took her 2 weeks to build a clean system from the wreckage. She worked mornings while Lily was in the school that Catherine had helped enroll her in, a school 4 blocks away where the teachers were good and the yard had swings. She worked evenings after Lily was asleep. She did not think of it as paying a debt. She thought of it the way she used to think of her best work, as the satisfaction of bringing order to chaos, of making the invisible visible. Catherine gave her coffee in the mornings and did not hover. She had a talent for being present without intruding, a quality Simone had rarely encountered in employers. The restaurant staff accepted Simone with the pragmatic warmth of people who understood that everyone arrived somewhere from somewhere else. Lily, for her part, bloomed in the way that children bloom when they have stability, and enough food and a bedroom with a lock on the door. She made a friend at school, a girl named Sophie, and she talked about Sophie at dinner with the passionate attention to detail that Simone recognized from her own childhood. The way a first real friend fills up all the available space in your thoughts. It was on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks after the night in the parking garage, that Catherine knocked on the door of the office and sat down across from the desk. "I need to tell you something," Catherine said, "and I want to tell you before you hear it from someone else." Simone set down her pen. "My restaurant is not my only business," Catherine said. "I own 4 properties in Vancouver, 2 in Victoria, and a development company that has interests in 8 projects currently under construction. I also have a silent partnership in a holdings company." She paused. "The holdings company has a complicated history. Some of the early capital came from sources that were not entirely straightforward." Simone was quiet. "I am telling you this because you are looking at my books," Catherine continued, "and because you are good enough to eventually notice the things I have structured carefully so that they are not obvious. And I would rather you hear it from me, with the full context, than discover it yourself and conclude something inaccurate. What do you want from me?" Simone said. Her voice was very calm. She had learned, in the past year, how to keep her voice very calm when she was trying to understand something. "The same thing I said from the beginning," Catherine said. "Books that balance. Complete, clean, accurate books, not books that hide things. Books that show everything as it is now, which is legitimate, and which have been legitimate for the past 6 years." She met Simone's eyes. "I spent a long time on the wrong side of a line. I am on the right side of it now, and I intend to stay there. What I need is someone who can help me demonstrate that clearly, should anyone ever need it demonstrated." Simone thought about the folder in her backpack, the documents, the bank that had not investigated carefully enough, the system that had looked at the surface of things and decided it was satisfied. "You're asking me to make it bulletproof," Simone said. "I'm asking you to make it true," Catherine said. "The bulletproofing is a consequence." Simone picked up her pen again. She looked at the spreadsheet on the desk, at the clean columns she had built over 6 weeks. "I'll need access to everything," she said. "Every account, every entity, every holding. No partial picture," Catherine nodded. "Of course. And if I find something that concerns me, I'm going to tell you. Directly. I would be disappointed if you didn't." Simone looked up. "Then we can continue. Subscribe now if you want to keep hearing stories like Simone's. Stories about the people who fall and the ones who reach down. Stories about what it costs to rebuild and what it feels like when you finally do. This channel is where those stories live. Hit subscribe and you'll never miss one." The months that followed had their own rhythm, different from anything Simone had known before. She learned the full shape of Catherine's world gradually, the way you learn a new city by walking it in every kind of weather. There were mornings when Catherine would arrive early, pour 2 coffees, and sit across from Simone's desk and talk through a decision she was trying to make, walking through the numbers out loud as if the act of speaking them helped her think. There were days when the restaurant was frantic with a private event, and Simone would find herself helping in the dining room, without quite deciding to, seating guests, managing the quiet emergencies that every large dinner produces. She met Catherine's business associates. Some of them were straightforward, some of them were not. She learned to read rooms the way she read spreadsheets, looking for the thing that did not quite balance, the entry that should not be where it was. One evening in April, Catherine introduced her to a man named Sterling Grant. Sterling Grant was the founder of a development company that held interests in 3 of Catherine's projects. He was perhaps 55, with the kind of ease that came from decades of operating at a level where nothing was ever truly urgent, because he had enough resources to absorb whatever happened. He shook Simone's hand and asked what she did, and when she told him, something in his expression shifted from polite to attentive. "Catherine's books were a catastrophe before you arrived," he said. "She told me you rebuilt the whole system. The foundation needed work," Simone said. "That's a diplomatic answer." He smiled, and it was a real smile, the kind that reached the corners of his eyes. "What did you think of the Q1 variance in the Canby project?" Simone looked at him for a moment. "I think the material cost overrun was real, but the labor reconciliation was conservative in a way that made the variance look worse than it was. When you normalize it, you're about 4% off target, not 9. Sterling Grant was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Catherine, where has she been for the past 10 years?" "She's been dealing with a situation," Catherine said, with a tone that closed the subject without drama. Sterling Grant looked at Simone, and she saw in his face a kind of professional recognition that she had almost forgotten existed, the look of someone who understood what they were seeing. "I need a CFO," he said. "My current one is retiring in July. I've been looking for 6 months and the right person hasn't arrived yet." Simone said nothing. "I'm not making an offer in someone else's kitchen at a dinner party," he added. "That would be rude. But I'd like to have a proper conversation if you're willing." Simone thought about Lily, who that morning had shown her a drawing she had done at school, a house with a garden and a cat, with 4 people standing in front of it. When Simone had asked who the people were, Lily had pointed to them one by one. "That's you. That's me. That's Catherine. That's Sophie. Just a drawing, but also not just a drawing." "I'd be willing to have a conversation," Simone said. What she did not know, standing in that kitchen with a glass of wine she had not touched, was that her husband had been looking for her. She found out on a Monday morning in May, when a man she did not recognize was standing outside the restaurant as she arrived. He was not threatening, exactly, but he was paying attention to her in the specific, deliberate way of someone who had been told to look for a particular face. She walked past him without showing that she had noticed. She went inside, locked the office door, and sat very still for approximately 90 seconds. Then she called Catherine. Catherine came downstairs in 3 minutes. She listened without speaking, while Simone described the man outside. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. "He's been trying to locate you," Catherine said after she hung up. "He has a claim. Some legal instrument connected to the original mortgage dispute. His lawyer filed it in February, and it apparently took this long to track down a current address." Simone felt the familiar cold spreading through her chest, the fear she had carried for 11 months and had only recently, carefully, begun to put down. "He wants something," she said. "He wants money," Catherine said, "which is all he's ever wanted." "I don't have money." "No, but he doesn't know what you have." Catherine looked at her steadily. "You have been rebuilding for 5 months. You have documentation that proves what happened to your accounts. You have a lawyer." "Yes, you do, because I've been retaining one on the company's account, and she has been reviewing your situation for 2 months, because I thought it was possible something like this might happen." Simone stared at her. "You didn't tell me." "I didn't want to frighten you before there was something concrete to deal with." Catherine paused. "I'm telling you now. Her name is Renata Cho, and she is very good, and she would like to meet with you this afternoon if you're willing." Simone thought about the fear, about how it had shaped every decision she had made for almost a year, about how it had convinced her to make herself small and invisible, about how she had spent so long believing that the system that had failed her would fail her again, that she had stopped trying to use it. She thought about Lily's drawing, the 4 people in front of a house with a garden. "Set up the meeting," she said. Renata Cho was a small woman in her mid-40s with sharp, quiet eyes and the manner of someone who processed information at a speed most people never observed because it was invisible. She met with Simone that afternoon in the restaurant after closing, with Catherine present, and she laid out what she had found. The mortgage document with the forged signature could be challenged. The bank had not investigated, but a private forensic document examiner had, and her findings were unambiguous. The line of credit had been opened using a power of attorney that had never been properly executed and could be challenged. The firm that had let Simone go had done so in a manner that was likely actionable given the circumstances. "None of this is quick," Renata said, "and none of it is free. But it is solid. What he is filing is, frankly, an attempt to collect on debts that were created fraudulently. He is gambling that you don't have the resources to fight back." Simon looked at the documents spread across the table. Clean paper, clear logic. A case that could balance if you had the right system. "What do I do?" she asked. "You let me do my job," Renata said, "and you document everything from this point forward. Every contact, every communication, every date and time. You have been an accountant for 8 years. You know how to document." Simon almost laughed. I know how to document. The confrontation, when it came, was nothing like she had feared. It was a Wednesday morning in June, 3 weeks after the meeting with Renata. Simone was at her desk when Catherine came to tell her that her husband had arrived at the restaurant. He had walked in through the front door and told the staff he needed to speak with his wife. Simone took a breath. Then she stood and walked out of the office and through the kitchen and into the dining room. He looked the same. That was the first thing she noticed. The same careful clothes, the same practiced ease, the same expression that sat on his face like a mask fitted years ago and never removed. His name was David Aubert, and she had loved him once, and that felt now like information about a person she had been briefly and was no longer. "Simone," he said, "you look well. You're not welcome here," she said. "This is someone else's business and you weren't invited." He glanced around the restaurant. It was before opening hours and empty, except for a cook she could hear in the kitchen and Catherine, who had come to stand quietly in the doorway to the dining room, saying nothing. "I just want to talk," David said. "We don't need lawyers involved. We can settle this between us." "There's nothing to settle between us," Simone said. "Whatever you came here to discuss, you can discuss with Renata Cho. Her number is on the papers your lawyer received last week." His expression shifted. The mask slipped, just slightly, the way it always did when something was not going the way he had planned. "You can't afford Renata Cho," he said. "Apparently I can," Simone said. He looked at Catherine in the doorway. He looked at the restaurant, at the visible evidence of resources she had not had 11 months ago. The calculation behind his eyes was transparent to her, because she had learned to read it long before she understood what she was reading. "Who is helping you?" he asked. "People who are helping me," Simone said. "You should go." He stood his ground for a moment, the way people do when they are deciding whether the thing they thought was a bluff is actually a bluff. Then he buttoned his jacket and walked to the door. "This isn't finished," he said. "Yes, it is," Simone said. "You just don't know it yet." The door closed behind him. Simone stood in the empty dining room and looked at the white tablecloths and the chairs and the windows, with the morning light coming through them, and she felt something lift from her chest that had been there so long she had forgotten what she felt like without it. She was still standing there when Catherine crossed the dining room and put a hand on her shoulder. "Well done," Catherine said quietly. "I didn't do anything," Simone said. "You stood there," Catherine said. "Do you understand what that means? 6 months ago you were in a doorway in the snow. Today you stood in a room with the person who took everything from you, and you told him to leave and he left." Simone thought about that. "Yes," she said finally, "I suppose I did." Sterling Grant made his formal offer in July. CFO of Grant Development, a salary that made Simone's spreadsheet instincts want to check the figure twice, benefits, and an equity stake that would vest over 3 years. He made the offer in a proper meeting in a proper office, with a printed term sheet and a space for questions. Simone asked 12 of them. He answered 11 directly and said he'd get back to her on the 12th by end of week, and he did. She accepted on a Friday afternoon and drove straight back to the restaurant to tell Catherine. Catherine was in the kitchen, tasting something at the stove. She listened to the news and then she set down the spoon and hugged Simone once, briefly, the kind of hug that means everything is exactly as it should be. "There's something I want to show you," Catherine said. "Come Saturday." They drove on Saturday morning out of the city, through the North Shore and up into the hills, to a property Catherine had mentioned but Simone had never seen. It was not large, a converted farmhouse on 1.5 acres, with a view of the water that on a clear day stretched all the way to Vancouver Island. It had been empty for 2 years, waiting for Catherine to decide what to do with it. "I'm thinking of turning it into something," Catherine said. "A residence for women who need a place to land. Women like you were." She paused. "I'd need someone to help me structure it. The finances, the governance, the whole framework. Someone who understands how things need to be built so they last." Simone looked at the view, at the water and the light and the mountains that had been there longer than any of this, longer than any of the things that had happened to either of them. "I'd be glad to help," she said. 6 months later, Simone stood in that same spot on a Saturday morning, but the farmhouse behind her was no longer empty. It had been painted, repaired, furnished with the careful practicality of a place meant to actually be lived in. There were 4 women staying there, in various stages of their own rebuilding, and a schedule of support and services that had taken Simone 3 months to design and that she was still refining. Because the good systems were never finished, only continuously improved. Lily was 11 months older and several inches taller, and had developed strong opinions about which books were worth reading and which movies were unfair to the animals. She had Sophie and 2 other friends now, and a teacher she adored, and a bedroom with a lock on the door that she did not feel she needed to mention anymore, because it had been a long time since a locked door was a miracle rather than a given. Catherine came to stand beside her, 2 cups of coffee in hand. "The new resident arrives Monday," Catherine said. "I spoke with her social worker yesterday. She has a background in marketing." "Good," Simone said. "There's a local firm that has been asking about pro bono placements. I'll make the connection." Catherine handed her a coffee and they stood looking at the water for a while without talking, which was one of the things Simone had come to appreciate about this friendship, the ease of its silences. "Can I ask you something?" Simone said. "Always. The night you saw me in that doorway, you said you'd been the person that people pretended not to see." She paused. "What happened to you?" Catherine was quiet for a moment. The water caught the light and held it. "I was 31, Catherine said. "I was running a restaurant that wasn't mine, for a man who turned out to be nothing like what he presented himself as. And one night I had $70 and a garbage bag with my clothes and nowhere to go." She looked at her coffee. "A woman let me sleep on her couch. And then another woman helped me with a loan, and another one gave me a reference. It took 5 women to get me to where I could stand on my own." Simone listened. "I've been trying to be the first woman," Catherine said, "for a long time now, the one with the couch." She glanced at Simone. "You became something different. You became the woman who builds the couch, and the building the couch is in, and the system that makes sure there are enough couches." Simone thought about balance sheets, about the satisfaction of a column that came out right, of making the invisible visible, of finding order in chaos and building something from it that was solid and true. She thought about Lily's drawing, 4 people in front of a house, with a garden. "I want to be honest about something," Simone said. "I don't know if I would have done what you did. If I had driven past a doorway and seen someone standing there, I don't know if I would have stopped." Catherine considered this with the seriousness it deserved. "Maybe not. But you'd know now, and you'd stop." Simone looked out at the water and thought that might be exactly right. Sterling Grant had a saying that she'd come to understand after 6 months of working with him. Every number tells a story. The job is to read it honestly. She had started saying it herself in the meetings she now ran, to the people she now supervised, and she meant something slightly larger by it than he probably did, because she had learned, in the years since she'd stood in a parking garage in the snow with a 7-year-old and a broken backpack zipper, that the most important numbers were the ones that were hardest to measure. The cost of being seen, the interest that accumulated on a single act of trust, the compound return on a door that someone held open in the dark. Those numbers balanced. She had checked them herself. If you've watched this far, it's because something in Simone's story reached you. Leave a comment, even just 2 words, so I know you're here. And if you know someone who needs to hear that falling isn't the end of the story, share this with them today. On this channel, we believe everyone deserves a hand reaching down when they're at the bottom. Subscribe, and every week we'll give you a reason to believe that.